then I'll go. Thought that I drop, you know that I'm leaving town tomorrow. I'll cause you no more sorrow. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go. I brought the money like the lawyer said to do. It won't replace all the heartaches I've caused you. It won't take the place of loving you, I know. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go.
All right. Do we have it? I think we have it. I'm guessing we have it. Okay, I had to reinitiate it in the software. I have no idea why it was showing here it was working, which is what's confusing. But I had to reset everything. You just can't trust your notifications telling you things are working or not. And after I just went through a lot of stuff, I'm glad somebody piped up. Yeah, the intro and the microphone, they're different circuit. Everything you hear practically is something different. All right, so let's get to it since we lost 5 minutes. Thank you guys. All right, today I'm going to talk a couple news items, and then I'm going to talk at some length. I guess you say our topic for today is going to be apartment hunting. So somebody last week asked about that and decided, so let's follow up. So again, my notifications are also not working. I don't know why everything reset, but I know that Juka and Jerry, actually before we even began, sent something in. I don't know how much, but I did see the name, so thank you for the contribution. And let's see if we can get to some news. All right, first one. Boom. Candio, the largest exporter of non-mining goods in the country. Okay, so for those that don't know, Candio is the state or the department that Armenia is located in. So it'd be kind of like Albany versus New York, state of New York, city of Albany. So we're the city of Armenia, the capital of Candio. It's called departments here, but it's like a state. It's the number one exporter in all of Colombia. And the reason it says non-mining is Some of the biggest stuff they do is emeralds and gold. Colombia is just famous for those things. Gold, it's been number 1 in the past. It's been number 2, number 3. I think it's number 5 or 6 on the list now. I mean, it varies. Emeralds, last I knew it was number 1, but it could be 2 or 3. But it's definitely up there. It's number 1 by far, and it sales increased in 2022 as compared to 2021, increased 100%, just over 100.8%. In other words, the sales doubled. It's like $500 million now, just in Quindío. And it's coffee, bananas, flowers, palm oil, and a big item that comes out of here, I think it was number 2, is Tahiti, limes or limon. The Tahiti version is really popular, and they export a ton of them. So that's pretty cool. I had to laugh, though. In the article I was reading, it was talking about the vice president was giving Petro all the credit for that because of, his policies, and he wasn't president when that happened. It's like, anyway, it's like a clown show. Okay, now to the good stuff. The good news, the interesting news. We've got here Carlos Leder, the ex-capo of the Medellin cartel, spoke from Germany. Now, this is a fascinating story. I was going to do a video on it. I did a ton of research. I researched it for weeks. I had a crap load of old photos from the 80s, lots of stuff, because it's right on our doorstep here. Now, this guy, just to give you a quick rundown, Carlos was actually, there were 2 people that were head of the Medellin cartel, Pablo Escobar, which everybody knows about, and this guy. They were equal co-partners. They were the leaders of that cartel. This guy survived. He's still alive. He's now living in Germany. He served his time in the United States. Well, let me back up. Here in Colombia, they caught him. They extradited him. He was the first, during the drug wars, first person to ever be extradited under a fairly new law. The law was only 7 years old, to the United States, because most of his crimes were related to the United States and fewer in Colombia. He was not really involved in all the violence and stuff that Pablo Escobar was. On the other hand, he was the brains of the outfit, and he was the reason that 80% of that trade was the Medellin cartel. He was the reason that it exploded almost overnight, because he came up with the idea of doing it through the air and how to do it, and how to fly under the radar. And he bought an island in the Caribbean and had a mile-long runway and had warehouses, and it was under no other jurisdiction, so that they could operate pretty much with impunity. He also made the deal with Noriega to pass it through Noriega's hands without law enforcement being involved in it. Now, he got a life sentence plus 135 years in the United States. However, he cooperated with the information about Noriega. And for that, he was actually released from prison in 2020, and he was sent to Germany. Now, his parents were born German. He lived in Armenia, Colombia. He grew up. But he didn't want to come back to Colombia for pretty good reason. And so he took on his father's citizenship, which he can do, and or father and mother parents, and he is now living in Germany. And what this is about is, as he speaks, well, this woman in Ecuador wrote a book about him, and it gives the impression that he was involved in it somehow. And so he told her, pull it off the market. He's going to sue her because he's under contract to do a documentary on his life. And anyway, we don't need to go into all the nuances, I guess. But the whole story is pretty fascinating. And the reason that I'm interested in it, not just that he lived in Armenia. Well, let me show you this latest. It's only a minute long. It's a video clip of what they plan to do with this inn. He built this German inn, and he had parties with like 2,000 people there at one time, and he had parties on weekends, and people from all over the world. A lot of movie stars from the U.S. and music people and would come to these parties. And he had a big statue of John Lennon at the entrance as you went in. He was obsessed with Lennon. He had pictures of him all throughout. I mean, I guess you'd say it was almost like an adult Lennon theme park. Pretty cool place. But if you've ever been here and you've gone to Salento, up on the hill, as you're turning to Salento, you see this burned out building. And you go, what was that all about? So let me show you this news clip. If you understand Spanish, you'll get it. If not, I'll give you the cliff notes when it's over.
De las casas con estilo de los Alpes alemanes, poco queda en la posada alemana en el Quindío. Menos aún de su mítica estatua de John Lennon, un cóndor, 2 leones, la discoteca y el restaurante en cúpula de cristal que había edificado Carlos Leder Rivas a la entrada de Salento. El lugar en los próximos meses tendrá un cambio radical.
Allí se va a hacer un parque, un hospital veterinario, senderos ecológicos, avistamiento de aves, un tema que pasó de mucha tristeza para los quindianos, ahora pasa a ser un lugar de vida y de recuperación para todos los que nos visitan en este corazón de Colombia.
El proceso para la nueva atracción ha tomado más tiempo del que se tenía contemplado. Además de la suspensión de actividades por el COVID-19, el ecoparque incluye el desalojo de algunas personas que permanecen allí de manera ilegal.
Ya estamos en estudios previos para iniciar obras lo más pronto posible. Por cuenta de las regalías vamos a poder allí invertir para que todos los que nos visitan vean en este sitio que fue emblemático de narcotráfico del señor Carlos Leder, ahora sea un sitio de recuperación.
Con estas acciones, el Quindío busca pasar la página de uno de sus episodios más oscuros y reescribir en este lugar nuevas historias.
Now, if you notice that big cage, kind of a dome-shaped cage, he had a bunch of exotic birds in there. Somebody said, indeed, that was burned out zoo. Well, not really, but he did have some things there. He had some animals. And there were a lot of outbuildings. You don't really see them much from the road, but they were like bungalows you could stay in. So it was called the German Inn. You had the main building, and then you had various outbuildings, and you had a whole bunch of these bungalows. It was quite a thing. And the guy he wasn't all bad. He was a brilliant guy. It's interesting, his story, how he got involved in all of this stuff. But it was one of those things that, all right, you're in, you can't get out. But what he did was he took a lot of the money that he made and he put it into various projects, and this was one of them, back in his hometown, to try to put Armenia on the map and provide jobs. So, you know, kind of cool in a cocaine-ridden way, I guess. So why didn't you do the video? You talked about it a year ago. After I did that research, I put so much time and effort into it. And then when I was having those computer problems, the folder vanished. I can't find it. I have no idea where it is. I think it got relocated. I've done a ton of searches. I spent way too much time. I probably could have gone and researched it all again. The amount of time I, trying to find it. I had so much copy. I had a script that I was working on writing. It was almost done. That took forever because I was going to show all of these things and just do a voiceover. And I was just so frustrated after all of that. I just kind of put it on the back burner and forgot about it. And then this brings it up again. It's a really good story, and I want to tell it, but it's hard to get information on it. I mean, you can get some cliff notes and little things here or there, but some of the photos I had, I don't even know how I'll find them again. Some of the photos were on somebody's personal website, which no longer exists, but I found it on an archive. I don't know if I'm going to find that again. So anyway, I heard during his time in Armenia was a dangerous place. Not then. Later. Armenia wasn't dangerous because of the drug trade or drug cartel. That really didn't exist here. Because he was from here, but he wasn't living here through all of that. And he pretty much had backed out of it to a certain extent when he started that hotel thing. It became dangerous in the 90s, in the late 90s, when the FARC were very active in this area. When my ex-wife got kidnapped, when was it? 2001, when she got kidnapped by the FARC. I was here in 2002. I got shot at. There were a lot of things going on back at that time. It's long since gone. Of course, that stopped too. Let me see if I can quickly turn that back on. I'll tell you, it's a morning. It's a morning. All right, are we back? Do we have it? Come on. Loading. Next thing I know, YouTube will have me shut off again. Okay. He had a giraffe or two. Yeah, that's true. He had a few animals. I laughed when you said burned out zoo. It wasn't quite to that level, but he definitely had. I mean, he built that bird cage. It was huge. Standard for politics. Say it fast enough, not too many people will notice. Yeah, it's true. I mean, particularly on the socialist end, I mean, part of the playbook is to just say something and repeat it and people will believe it. Okay, so how to find an apartment. Get out your notebooks if you're interested. I'm going to tell you what I do. Well, what I do these days is I mostly just talk to people I know and say, hey, I'm going to be looking for an apartment and such and such and such. And I get feedback that way. But you have to be here for a while and know people for a while for that to happen. First, you want to decide the area. Now, if you don't know the area, then you're not ready to rent an apartment and stay in the hotel or Airbnb until you know the area a little bit better. So when I say area, I mean like the barrio. Like I lived in the Centenario area, but I also lived in behind Mocawa, for example. That's the barrio La Lorena. You've got the Castellana area. One of my favorites. So know these areas. They're not going to be huge areas for the most part. It'll be kind of like a 4x4 block area. So know where it is you want to be. Understand they're a year lease, and so it doesn't have to be perfect, which is my number 2 thing. It doesn't have to be perfect if you're not near something that you figure out you want to get closer to, then you just move the next year. Years go pretty fast. Number 2, understand it's unlikely that you're going to find everything that you want in an apartment. You know, people that come and talk to me and they say, well, I want an apartment. They list off all of these things. And finding all of those things in any given moment is going to be next to impossible. So in other words, you need to decide what you're going to compromise. Because I say at any given moment, everything's not available all the time. Also, understanding that there really is no such thing as an apartment building. These apartments are all personally owned by somebody. If they're in a big building and there's 100 places, they're called condos actually, then they could have 100 owners. So you're not renting from the building, you're renting from the personal owner. And sometimes the places that might be ideal are not, they're just not available to rent, or they're not available to rent when you're looking. It may be in 3 months, maybe next year. So you have to understand that 1, you can change in a year, and 2, I guarantee you're going to have to compromise some things on that list. I'm not receiving any sound on my broadcast. I think you are. You might have some old stuff. Sound is good, yeah. Okay, he might be, he picked up because it's still live early in the video. He'll figure it out. Okay. When you get a late start, you're starting at a different point in time than where the rest of us are. So understand that you're going to need to do some kind of compromise. If you may not get the balcony of your dreams facing the mountains, for example, which is actually not the best. It's actually not the best location, because facing the other side, for the most part, is better, because that's where you get the constant breeze. If you're on the side away from the constant breeze, certain times of the year you can get mosquitoes. Depending on where it is, if you're near one of the rivers, you can get some mosquitoes because there's no breeze there to blow them away. There's not a lot of mosquitoes, but if you're on that side of the building, you can get some. And of course, you don't get that constant breeze. You can get some breezes that kind of go around the building, but it's different. That constant breeze is a natural air conditioning, and it's just fantastic. And if you want to warm it up a little bit, you just shut your windows or your sliding doors, and it warms it up. So there's things that you want to understand about that. When I was at 360, I had an angled building where I was in, part of the building I was in, it's V-shaped, and I was on a part that I could see the mountains, I could see Armenia, and I was facing the breeze. I mean, it was perfect. That's why I cried so much about leaving there. Another thing about views, they're fantastic. And I don't know how to say this so that it's understood. After a while, some things become background noise. It's one of the things, like here where I'm living, the natural beauty is breathtaking. But after a while, you kind of take it for granted. And it's only every once in a while. Like yesterday, I got hit with it. I was on the road between here and Pareda, and there's this particular area that always takes my breath away. And I go by there and I go, oh yeah, I'm living in paradise. You kind of need that reminder, because when you're seeing that kind of stuff every single day, it loses the same importance. And so a particular view, as time goes on, becomes less important, and other things take its place in priority. So there's that. Let me see. Oh, forget this co-signing stuff. I'll get to that. I'm going to get to it next. Agent or not. When you get into the co-signing, that's pretty much, I guess there'd be a few exceptions, but that's going to be with some sort of agent. And I've said in the past, don't ever work with agents. Now, I'm going to back that up a little bit, where you could check with agents here or there, but for the most part, they're going to waste your time, because they're going to tell you these big deposits and you got to have a cosigner, blah, blah, blah. I always deal with the owners. Now, there was one time I dealt with an agent over something, and they were particularly good, but it was extremely rare to find somebody that'll do that. And the bigger the company is, the less likely they're going to do that. I know firsthand over a situation I was dealing with where agents don't even do the wishes of the owner. They do whatever is best for them. And if the owner can be desperate to rent the place because it's been empty for 3 months and he just can't afford to keep paying double mortgages, for where he lives in that one, and the agents don't care. They could get a buyer that an owner would accept, but they'll pass on it and sit there and wait another month for somebody to come along that'll put more money in their pocket. It's how owners, or it's how the agents are. So how do you avoid that? Because agents, it's easy. They'll go out and do a lot of the legwork for you, but you're going to pay for it. So let me tell you, we'll get into some other things. I'll talk about the websites too. See, you're talking about, again, agent. All right. When you're looking for an apartment, you want to set your price range. Low, high. You say, well, I want it as low as possible. Well, you can waste your time looking at places that you're not going to want to be in. So, set your low, set your high. Take in consideration fluctuation of the dollar. Think probably worst case and make sure that your high will suit that worst case if the dollar drops down to 3,000 or something like that. Whatever you determine. Understand that, so that if you get fluctuations in the dollar, and sometimes it'll drop way down or go back up, make sure that you can still afford the rent if it does that. I think that's a pretty important consideration. Okay, internet. I know the website you're talking about. If you're lucky, here in Armenia, there might be one or two places on there. It is not a good place. It is not a good place to look. Number two, if they're on websites, they're probably going to be overcharging, or charging more than they would if you were meeting in person or talking to the owner. Sometimes the owner will put them up on there. People here don't really, for the most part, use the various websites out there. But a website that is actually somewhat useful, at least informationally, and I would look before you get started just to get some idea of what's out there. Facebook Marketplace. That is, in Armenia, that's used a lot by people for various things. If you want to get a used refrigerator or whatever, it's a good place. And that would be my number one place on the internet to look. 2 and 3 are way behind. Mercado Libre will have some places in it, although not too much. And OLX used to be awesome. Kind of sucks the last few years. So Facebook Marketplace is the key. Now, in Facebook Marketplace, agents will also advertise in there. So be aware of that and take it for what it's worth. They usually announce that they're Century 21 or whatever it is they're working for. And so understand that. I started off by saying know the area. What you want to do next is the area that you want to live in, walk it. Get out and walk it. Most places, something like, I don't know if this is true. Somebody told me, and this was a couple years ago, somebody here in Colombia that deals with real estate told me that there's only about 2 or 3% of the properties that are available are on the internet. Personally, I think it's probably more 10 or 15%, but I don't really know. Bottom line is it's real low. And so if you're only trying to search on the internet, you're missing out on a lot of good stuff. And chances are it's going to be better priced. There's a good chance you might end up dealing with the owner, and that's a key thing. So get out and walk the barrios. Look for signs in the windows. And you want to walk on the back street because, if you got an apartment on the side you're walking and there's no sign, but if you walk on the other side of the building, then all of a sudden you see the sign. They're only going to put the sign in the apartment that they own. So, keep that in mind. There was somebody was actually in Pereira that said, well, I walked by this building and they had no signs. I really wanted to get in there. I said, well, there's 2 things to do. 1, walk on the backside and look for signs there. And 2, go in and talk to the guard. Well, he walked on the backside and there, lo and behold, there were a couple of them. And then he went in and got some more information. But that leads me to the other thing is if they've got a building, you don't see any signs anywhere, but you really are interested in that building, go in and talk to the guard. They usually, you would think always, but not always, but they usually know if there's anything available or coming available. So, go in and talk to them. When you get the information, the phone number or whatever, you really want to try to talk to the owner. I've found time and again, owners are flexible. Owners won't require co-signers. If you're from the U.S., here in Armenia, people from the U.S. are considered to be, they always pay their rent. Let me put it that way. There's not a lot of us, but the ones that are here have created a good reputation of always paying their rent. Well, if you own a place, what's your number one concern? Number 2 is most of us here are old farts, and we don't have tear 'em up parties. And so, you get of a certain age and you're more likely to see something wrong and fix it. And so we have a reputation of actually caretaking the places. So what's the number 2 concern, for the landlord? You're not going to tear it up and you'll take care of it. So those are really good things in a place like Armenia. Armenia's not the only place, but if you're looking at Medellin or Bogota, it's a different set of instructions. Most of this applies, but there's a lot of differences there. So you kind of want to talk to the owner, and don't be afraid to walk away. I've told this story before, but when I got my first place here in Armenia, this time around, when I moved from Manizales, I knew where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in the Mokawa area. Not that it's the best area, but it's kind of midpoint to things I was going to walk to. I wanted to, walk down to La Catorce downtown, and I wanted to walk up to the mall area. And it was maybe not quite midpoint, but somewhere around midpoint. And so that was important to me. And so I found a place, talked to the owner, but it was a flighty owner. We came to an agreement, and then when I was ready to finalize and do the paperwork and all of that, couldn't get a hold of him. 3 days went by, and I said, well, the hell with this. I got to have a place. And so I went to my backup place, and the owner there, and I had negotiated because I was really set on that first one, but I had found one. So I got a hold of the owner for that one. And first he wanted 6 months deposit, which is really unusual. That's more Medellin, Bogota. And I said, no, I can't do that. I appreciate your time, but I'm not going to do it. About 15 minutes later, he got back to me. Then he wanted 3 months. And as I said, I appreciate it, but bottom line is it took 3 times around where he got back to me, because I'd also researched enough to know that he had this place unrented going on 4 months, 3 months and something. So I knew he had pressure on him. And so I had, even though I needed a place fast at that point because of all the lost time, I used that. And so I ended up getting $50,000 off of the cost of the rent every month, and a month deposit, which I haven't paid a deposit since, but that's where we negotiated, and I moved in for a year lease. I ended up extending, so I ended up staying there 2 years altogether. And he wanted to increase you after a year. Legally, you're allowed to do an increase up to 10%. However, you have to notify the tenant prior to the month before he's notified. So you need a month prior to him fulfilling his notification period if he's going to stay or go. So for me, it was 30 days. It was originally 60 days. But in the negotiation, I got that down to 30 days. And so he had to notify me 60 days prior to the expiration that there was going to be an increase. He didn't. And so I called him on it, even though it was really pennies. But I was just kind of annoyed. He sprung it on me after I signed the second lease. And I was kind of annoyed over that. And I said, I'm not going to pay it. And he didn't know that I knew the law on that particular item. And so, I'm sorry. He was very nice about it, and we backed away. But in dealing with the owner, you can do those things. You can have some give and take and some back and forth. Whereas when you're dealing through an agent, it's their way or the highway kind of thing. It's very difficult to deal with agents. I'm going to get to this stuff here in a minute. I see some writing. What was the, I'm forgetting something. Based on earlier, got everything on the notes, but something came up earlier and I said I'll cover it in a bit, and now I don't even remember what that was. All right, well, let me see. Let's see. Whoa, a lot of comments here. There is a legal co-signing company in Pereira. It's 1 million pesos. Woo! Just so you know, I've negotiated the rent on, I've been in 3 places for over 4 years, 4.5 years. 4.5 years. I've negotiated rent. I paid that 1 deposit. The next 2, I paid no deposit. I did pay 100,000, whatever that, what's that, $25 cleaning fee, refundable. So, and I've never had a cosigner. Here in Armenia, it's only necessary through an agent. If you talk to an owner, based on reputation that we have, it won't be an issue. If it is, just move on to the next. You know, like I said, compromise on your first one. Once you're here for a while, you get a better sense of where you want to be, what the places are like, what is actually important to you, because what you think is important when you get here, some of those, I guarantee you, some of those things are going to change. So once you have that kind of nailed in on your first year, plan for the next year and kind of prepare of what's out there, what's available, keep your eye on it, and as you're getting closer, see if you can lock something down. And sometimes leaving a place isn't that difficult. You know, you think, well, if I leave, I got to pay all this. Not necessarily. If you're dealing with an owner, you can come to an agreement that can make leaving 2 months early, for example, a very inexpensive thing, if that's really what you want to do, and then your credit's not hurt or anything like that. So, so there's that. All right, what do we have? Is that a good site for rental properties? No, not necessarily. If you're American, do they up the price? No, but they up the price when they put it on a website. So they figure you're a wealthy Colombian or you're coming from the U.S. Here, there's very little activity overall coming from outside of Colombia, so it's really not a thing here. I have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment in Britannia, in between El Center and Centenary. Oh yeah, okay. It's my vacation place when I visit from the USA. I only used it 2 months out of the 4 years. How much should I rent it out for? I have no idea. Send me some photos, and I can talk about it next week once I have some idea of what building it's in and what it looks like. So send me that information, and I'd be happy to mention it. Are there some good areas you can recommend? Are there some good areas you can recommend for living? There's a bunch, and they're not all in the north, but there's one place in the south. That's actually where Mike was living. What the heck's the name of the? Oh, phew. All right, let me. I always draw a blank on this because I'm always thinking Lorena, and it's not Lorena. It's where the hell is it? His double L's. Villa Liliana. That barrio is very nice, and to the south of it is a pretty good sized forest. So, you know, the south is, you know, you always say it's hot. Yes. However, if you're right near this forest, that kind of generates this cooler breeze. And so it's an exception. So it's an interesting barrio. It's more traditional, but there's a lot of cool things there. It's more traditional, but everything there, like, you know, like Cheers, hey Norm, you know, a local community pub and little restaurants and things like that. They're pretty cool. And you've got some decent, good-sized supermarkets nearby. It doesn't have anywhere near the amenities that you have in the north, but you can also, well, I've been looking, because I can leave anytime, and I keep thinking about it. And I found a place down there. It's a penthouse, the top 2 floors. The 1 floor is inside, just been remodeled, gorgeous. It's nice finishes, nice wood finishes. It's really nice. And then it's got the stairway, and it goes to an outdoor, the top of the building. you have the entire top of the building. Part of it, there's an L shape that's covered and it's got protection from rain and stuff. Excuse me, but it's open. And the way the temperature and the weather is here, that would be livable. Actually, I was looking at that saying, what an awesome place to put my studio. Say, well, why would you put it up there if it rains? Because it would be protected, even though you have all this openness. And it's on the 15th floor, so you can imagine you got a pretty good shot of the city. And on the other side, you've got all the countryside. What a great place to do these live videos with that as a backdrop. Now, this is a brick wall. This is real. It's not a green screen. But how awesome would it be if that was, some green outdoors, some of that beautiful scenery. So I'm looking at that place, elevator, of course, parking, all the, gymnasium and all that kind of stuff that you get with buildings. And it's $1,200,000. That's $300,000 less than I'm paying. So it's like, what is that? $300, something like that, maybe less. So a place like that, you might want to consider it. If you're out traveling a lot, doesn't really matter where you are. If you're in and around the house, doesn't really matter too much where you are. It's only if, you want to go to one of the particular malls or something like that. Yeah, but then, you jump in a taxi and you pay 10,000 pesos to go to the north end of the city. Or you can always take a bus, but okay, what else? You got the Castellana area. I mentioned the Centenario area. Laurales up near Portal Condillo. There's some places on the east side of Parque Fundadoras that are pretty awesome. There's some older, very large places. Sometimes older if they were nice to begin with. They're like really premium. A lot of the new places, I don't know, they have the same cookie cutter fake wood and these are the nice places. And, you just have a lot of the same, built to look really nice, but kind of cheap. It's just kind of how a lot of things are done. And you get some of those old ones and you got these big solid wooden doors and wooden cupboards and, it's really nice. Downside is they very often have this atrocious multicolored tile where the new places will have these really nice gray or off-white tiles or something clean looking. But anyway, those are good spots. But then there's others like where I used to stay when I would come visit from Ecuador. It was right near the Sena. That's just west by a few blocks of the Unicentral Mall. You can find this on Google. Look at the Unicentral Mall, move west, you'll see the Sena Education building. Right in there, it's residential. It's mostly two-story houses connected. Relatively inexpensive, usually pretty good size. There's a lot of local things, like there's a coffee shop that I used to love to go to in the morning. There was a building that was nothing but fresh fruit. It was like a fruit stand, but in a building, and it was big. So very safe. I guess safety is a big thing for a lot of people, and so knowing that one I just described, I would put that as a 2-tier. I wouldn't object to living there. It would be a nice place to live. I have my preferences because of how I live. I like access to certain things. It's just more convenient if I can walk to something rather than take a taxi. On the other hand, if I were saving a fair amount of money, then that will certainly pay for the taxi. So those I think are the prime areas. But again, you get out and walk them. Some are just too noisy for me. All right, what else we got here? We have 2 dogs. We want a house with a yard, not an apartment. No. Houses with yards are pretty much, I won't say they're non-existent. But like this house I'm living in, it has a community yard. I mean, it's not a single standing house. This isn't the United States. They build them in groups unless you're out in the country. And if you're out in the country, you'll get that, but you've got an awful lot of downsides that you really have to take into account. And it's certainly not a place that you want to live if it's the first time living here. So you don't move here and start out in the country. It's not the brightest thing to do. But where I live, there's a lot of green areas that are part of this conjunto, or it's like a complex. And you got little signs, you know, clean up after your dog. So the dogs can go out and go on the green spaces. Of course, you can take them for walks, and there's lots of green areas, you know, that your dog can run in and things like that. But most houses here, like in that one I described behind Unicentral, there is no yard. Yards are not really a thing for the most part. On the other hand, hardly anyone ever objects to having pets. Pets is a common thing here, and it's easy to find a place that will accept dogs. It'll be harder for you to find a place with a yard, but they do exist. So you could live where I'm living, for example. Would you allow me to post a link to my house for sale in Salento here? I'm not sure where you would post it, but sure. You might want to go to the Adventures in Grand Columbia Facebook page. That might be useful. Okay, what else we got? Must be expensive if it's in Salento. No, local. We'll move to local or local? Salento. There are more gringos living in the Salento area by far than live in Armenia. Actually less expensive than others in Salento. 3 places in 4.5 years. Are the reasons just personal preference or bad landlord issues? No, I have the freedom to do it. Why not do it? And moving is simple. I mean, I moved a house with 3 bedrooms completely, you know, stove, a refrigerator and washing machine, and, you know, picture a 3-bedroom house plus my studio with tons of electronic equipment, computer equipment. And it cost me $150, I think it was, 120, 150,000 pesos for a truck and a couple of movers. I've used them a few times. They do an awesome job. I've never had as much as a smudge on anything. They're extremely careful. They're very fast. They work with, unlike most people here, they work right on through lunch. I've talked before about this guy, and it's so cheap. Moving is not a hassle. I always box things up, and they take it from there. But they'll even come in with boxes and box it up. I don't know how much more, but it would still, based on its prices, I'm sure it would be cheap. Mike, excellent barrio. Yeah, that's where Mike used to live. Yeah, I did some videos out in that barrio long ago, long before you moved out there, Mike, and I always thought that was a very, very cool area. What about homes? We want a home with a yard for our 2 dogs. Can you find home with yards? Yeah, I went over that already. Maybe the airport. Yeah, well, that's out in the country. house by the airport. You don't have to go that far out there. But even in the small villages, you're going to find houses the same way. It's just tradition here that they build right next to each other. I mean, attached to each other. Check out link below. We have 4 dogs and 3 cats. Visited Armenia in 2000, a year after the earthquake. What about the safety standards for the new construction? Talked to this on at length a number of times. I've got a video you might want to look up that I did a few years ago about that earthquake. It's about a half an hour video. I based everything off the study that came from England and did a study report for the Colombian government. And during that earthquake, the damage or the loss of life had very little to do with the earthquake itself. It had to do with the poor construction in the south. In the north, where there were, even back then, there were skyscrapers, and back then there was only, or taller buildings, there was only, I think, 100, I forget the exact, like 105 or something like that. And every one of those buildings were inspected, and not a single one had any damage whatsoever, not a one. And if you visited in 2000, when you went through the north part with those buildings, they were all intact. All the damage was in the older areas. And the people lost their lives because they're in these, these old brick places that had no standards at that time. Now, since then, they adopted standards in the late 90s, and then they upped them a couple years later, and they, even prior to that earthquake, and then they went to the standards of San Francisco, and then in the last round, which was even a few years, like early 2000s, they even got more stringent than San Francisco's building construction. It's not a concern, really. Not that I have this kind of money, but just curious if someone had $150 to pay a month for rent. You're not going to find a place that expensive. I probably shouldn't say that, but that's ridiculous money. You can have a great place and live on $1,500 a month. You could, I don't remember prices now, but you could get a hacienda with a pool and just paradise on, just an amazing place for less than that. It's about 7-8 million. Well, it's about 7, I think. Yeah. That will come with a chef and a cleaning crew. Yeah. And then some, maybe a chauffeur thrown in. How many bedrooms in the 2-story penthouse? Well, after the remodel, technically it's 2 bedrooms. It's got 3 bathrooms. It could be easily 3 bedrooms. The way they did it, if I were living there, I'd probably put my studio up there, and I'd probably put my bedroom up on the 2nd floor, even though it's somewhat open. Okay, we've run past time, and I'm getting scratchy. Held out longer. I'm getting back in the swing of it. All right. So that's all we're going to cover today. If you have any, I don't know if I got other contributions. The notifications were not working. I will acknowledge it. if I did. And I thank you, of course. And feel free to send me any messages. If you liked the kind of thing I covered today, send me a message for some other topic like that, and see if I can put it together. So with that, I got some grocery shopping to do. So I'll see you next week.
Oh,